What's up, everybody? Welcome to EDG Weekly, the podcast where we talk about video games. Here today is Pedro Mirabal. What's going on, Pedro?
Hello, sir. How are you?
Doing very well. Usually we are a three-man podcast, but for the second week in a row, Nate decided to go to work instead of doing this podcast. So he's got his priorities all jacked up.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, we're still here to hash out these good, juicy stories. First thing that we wanted to get into at the top of the show, guys, is we wanted to talk a little bit. I'm going to start off by talking about this VR game, the Resident Evil VR game. I was watching a video over at Dual Shockers, and it had a bunch of people's reactions to, how scary the game is, and it's really cool. People are literally like jumping out of their seats over this game, and it just has me really hyped to see a actual AAA game that's in VR that's causing that immersion to where you literally are jumping up out of your seat. It's always been developers' goals to scare the crap out of people in the horror genre, but now with the help of VR, it seems to be doing that on a crazy scale. There's a girl that she said that basically when you're in VR, your brain does this weird thing where it you really think that you're there, and so she said because of that, when you see these creatures pass by the doorway, like it gives you the sensation that it's happening in real life. Another thing that was interesting about the video is they had the director that directs the Resident Evil movies try it out, and he was talking about some of the things that he experienced in the demo. Stuff that I would have never thought of. Like he's like, when you look down and you're looking at the floorboard, you can actually see like the texture in the floorboards, and just seeing moss fly by the front of your face. He's like, all of it just like really helps you feel like you're in that world. And then he also went on to talk about how he wants to get into making some Resident Evil, well, not necessarily Resident Evil, but movies for VR. And I wanted to get your take on that, Pedro. Like, how do you feel when it comes to people starting to make, movies specifically for VR?
I think that's the future. Movies for VR, events for VR. Pretty soon, I think that you'll have two types of tickets. Like online, it'll be like a live ticket where you go and experience something live, and then the VR ticket where you can watch it on your headset or whatever the case may be. I don't think that VR is meant specifically for gaming. It's meant for something like what the director of Resident Evil is doing, which is creating a horror movie for VR. I think that it gives you a more it just engulfs you more in the actual story. It's definitely going to be much scarier than watching it in a movie theater, because you'll actually feel like you're in the movie, which may or may not be a good thing.
Yeah, right. No kidding. Personally, I cannot wait to get my hands on it, this October, and, starting to hear about games like Resident Evil that are going to make it onto the VR headset. Like it's only got me more hyped. I know you're extremely hyped for the Batman game that they're working on. And, Greg Miller over there at Kind of Funny, he got a hands-on, with the game, and he says that it's probably going to blow people away. And, he wanted to give that his best of show. And I just thought that these types of stories that we're hearing starting to come out, this is amazing, man. Like, what a time to be a gamer. And I was going to let you get into your piece of top news, but this is a good segue into my second piece of top news, which is, Nintendo is talking about how they're not going to get into the VR world until it's mainstream. Now, I wanted to get your take on that. What do you feel about that?
They're kind of taking The Apple approach, I guess, is, kind of Apple allows other people to be the kind of beginners of new technology, and then they'll adopt it later on once they see, the kinks getting worked out, and then they go and make it better. I don't think that Nintendo is going to make VR any better, but I think that what they're doing is, it may seem like it's like a cost cutting move, in my opinion. You don't want to put that much technology in, let's say, an NX console if you don't think that VR is going to take off. So why bother, spending the money, in R&D for something that may not take off. It's like adding 3D support to a DVD player. DVD makers, DVD player manufacturers could have waited to see if families did want to watch movies in 3D before adding that functionality to it. Probably saved a few bucks and kept the cost down of his DVD player. But it ultimately it didn't happen. In my opinion, I think VR is going to take off. I think VR is the future. I think that games will be the beginning of VR, but it's not going to be all of what VR is. So I think that Nintendo, and right now there isn't a reason to buy VR. Let's be honest. There's not a reason to buy VR. Sony did a really good job of giving us a reason to try to purchase their PlayStation VR at E3 with like the Batman game, Resident Evil coming out in 2017, and a couple other small ones, smaller titles there. The Final Fantasy one that everyone seemed to enjoy when everyone saw the demo. But right now there really isn't a legit concrete reason with a game that's out that gives you that experience that you would expect from VR. That's not out yet. It may be out in October. And then we'll see, mid to late 2017, I think, is when we'll start seeing that market mature for VR games.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that maybe them like taking the wait and see type of approach, or like you said, not waste a lot of money and research and development? Do you think it has something to do with the fact that because of the failure that was the Wii U, like, do you think maybe they don't have as much of a budget to kind of throw at it? And, if it doesn't stick, this could be like really bad news to Nintendo. Like, I don't feel like they can, take a lot of loss on, any new technology that's, going to be put out to the market. Do you think it has something to do with that?
I don't know if it's financially that they have the issue. I think that, they're losing the hearts and minds of gamers on a daily basis. Especially when you have Sony coming out with the quality it's coming out with, especially when you have Microsoft coming out with what it's coming out with, and what they're promising for the future. When you have that and Nintendo isn't providing that in a space that's so competitive, such as the gaming space, you're going to lose the hearts and minds of young and old gamers. And right now, honestly, the only thing that if I were a Nintendo executive, I would want to kind of bring back that older crowd, because those are the people that grew up with Nintendo in its heyday, remember what it is, know the characters. These kids growing up today, they don't know Mario, they don't know Link, they don't know, Samus Aran, they don't know those classic characters that we know, that we grew up with. So in order for them to survive, they need to get us back, so then we can show our kids, our nieces, our nephews, the kids of our friends, what Nintendo has to offer. And they're not winning that on the console level. They may be winning it on the mobile gaming level because they really have no competition. But on the console level, they're losing the hearts and minds, and I think that they want to play it safe in terms of providing a quality console experience that necessarily doesn't have to do with the lack of money that they have to put into R&D to build the best console. I think that has to do with the fact that it doesn't matter how much money you can throw at a console. If it's the Wii U again, we're not buying it.
Yeah, and they talk a lot about, making sure that they win over the third-party developers again, because they say that's going to be the way to grow their audience once again, is to get the support from the third-party developers. So, I guess, their main focus right now is just to put out a compelling piece of technology that developers want to develop for, and they'll worry about all the rest, like later. Like, I guess right now, let's just get the NX in people's households, and then we'll tackle the VR discussion once we know the thing is selling. So like, it's a smart approach, but I just kind of wonder, like, what that'll do in terms of people that are really excited about VR. Nintendo saying that they're gonna hold off on it. Like, I don't know if that will change people's minds about purchasing one. I don't know if that'll push somebody a different direction, be like, oh well, now I know I can get the PlayStation, or just go over to PC because I really want VR experience. I don't know that it'll hurt them. And like you said, right now we just don't have those big VR games that are actually going to sell VR. So them waiting, I don't know. I don't think it's going to hurt them too much. If they get in 2 years down the road, that might be the best way to do it. When you actually have good third-party VR games out in the wild, and then it would be a good time for Nintendo to get into the VR space. I just wonder if they're a console like when we had the DualShock 4 controller. This thing was put out with VR in mind from day one. Like, you had the little light bar on there. So when the PS4 was in development, they knew down the road VR was going to be a thing. So here it is, going to be 3 years later after the launch of the PS4, and now we're going to have VR. I just wonder if Nintendo is going to have that forward thinking with the NX and make it to where their console will be able to cater to a VR type of piece of technology that developers can develop for on a third party basis. You know what I mean? To where we're making it for PSVR, we're making it for Oculus, and we're making it for NX, and everything will kind of be able to kind of coincide with whatever it's being developed for. Like, I don't know if, like, with Nintendo or something, it'll have to be on a first party basis. I just don't understand how they're going to pull that off, but I guess time will tell. You want to elaborate on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, thinking about it, I don't think that they're going to add that functionality or that compatibility with the NX out of the box, or else it'd be a major selling point. I mean, the major selling point for the Scorpio is not the fact that it's 4K ready. You're going to get games that are going to be in native 4K. It's the fact that, it's probably going to be the cheapest way to get a VR compatible rig, honestly. I mean, VR compatible rigs right now are $1,000 and above. If you can get one for under $1,000 that does basically the same thing, just as powerful, and then you can purchase whatever VR headset you desire. I think that's a win for what Microsoft is doing. I don't see the Nintendo announcing anything like that, especially with what their comments are. They're taking the wait and see approach. I expect them to come out with their own VR headset that's kind of like the PSVR, that has its own box that powers the VR headset. It'll probably be underpowered because they're coming in late to the party. But I just don't see. I don't see them including it in the box because it may not be that. That's obviously going to bring it above a price point that they want to be in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if they're going to revolutionize, the way we use our controller, which I think is what they've said in the past, they also may be going to cartridges, as we had in another Techno Buffalo article earlier this week, saying that there's more evidence that they are going to go with cartridges. I don't see them including, the compatibility to add something as powerful as an HTC Vive or an Oculus Rift.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's Nintendo. They're not exactly on the cusp of technology, but I hope we're kind of wrong about that. I hope that the NX comes out and it's got some pretty good specs. And, like, I think that if any console could benefit from having upgradable internals, it'd be Nintendo. Like we're seeing with the Scorpio that it's going to be upgradable. Like, it would be nice to see Nintendo take the kind of the same approach. Like I'd love to have an NX that I could just upgrade, as we go along. So we'll see if they do something like that. But what's your piece of top news this week, good sir?
Yeah, so perusing IGN during the week, I actually saw a really, really cool story out of IGN Unfiltered. It is a podcast that they have. It's a long form podcast, about 2.5 hours sometimes, with some of the top people in the gaming business. And this month, they actually did the co-creator of Xbox. They had an interview with him, and he gave us a cool tidbit of kind of the origins of the Xbox console, or the original Xbox console, I should say. They actually said that they reached out to Nintendo and to Sony to see if they would co-create a console with them, or B, partner with them on their newest console, whatever that may be. In which case, Sony or Nintendo would would manufacture the hardware, and Microsoft would take care of the networking and software part of the console. Both parties, or both manufacturers, said no on both fronts. Microsoft sent the big dog, Bill Gates, to go and talk to them about it, and they both, respectfully declined that offer, and thus the Xbox was born. What do you think, he listening to that story and kind of seeing how history played out? Do you think it was a blunder for Nintendo to kind of tell Microsoft no? And was it a blunder for Sony, considering they weren't as good as the Xbox, during the Xbox 360 days, when Microsoft really started getting their show on the road?
I think that the way it played out is the way it was supposed to play out. Like I think that that when it comes to gaming, specifically on console, I think it's as good as it is because we have three different, manufacturers that are all putting out, first party games, and it makes each manufacturer have to really push themselves, because competition it just equals a better product, because you have Sony trying to constantly one up Microsoft, and it just goes, full circle with the three different manufacturers. I don't really think that anyone would have by doing this. And I just think that, again, the way it played out is the way it was supposed to play out, and Sony did. It was getting its tail kicked a little bit last generation, but finally late in its life cycle is when it really started to shine. It started putting out some really good first party titles, and we watched Sony finally catch up to Microsoft there at the end. Was it an uphill battle? Yes, it was, but it's because that they only had themselves to count on. You know what I mean? Like it was only them that was gonna get them to be a top tier manufacturer, and yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah. I mean, in my opinion, it may have been a blunder for Nintendo to not take that, especially looking at where they're at right now. They don't even, they don't support online properly, and the online support that they have, I mean, I'm not even gonna call it online support, honestly. When you have to put in a 32 character or 16 to 32 character, like, randomly generated code for me and you to play, is that really online support? Like, we're in 2016. We don't need that. You should be able to use a username. Like, that's stuff that you would have to do, back in the 90s, 99, 98, 99, when the internet was just starting. The fact that you still have to do that now in 2016 means that they are really, really behind the eight ball, and they could have benefited much more from having a Microsoft kind of run their software and networking team while they make the hardware, in my opinion.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying that if the NX does fail, Nintendo's going to need to sell off, some of its licensing, get some of their first party games on, Sony and Microsoft's consoles. What do you think about that? If the NX is a failure and they're forced to do that, because I mean, like, they really could make a killing by, allowing Sony and Microsoft to use, Mario and Metroid and all that stuff.
I think that that's coming either way. Honestly, I think that Nintendo is too big. They've got too good of a character stable to be able to, or to not license them out to somebody, whether that be theme parks, movies, mobile games. Having PlayStation and Microsoft fight over who wants to create the next Mario game, who wants to integrate Mario into Killer Instinct or whatever the case may be. Who knows? That I think is the smartest idea for them in terms of a business. And I'm shocked that it hasn't happened yet. We do know that there are some things in the work, Nintendo movies or whatever the case may be. So they're starting to go that way. I don't think that the licensing of Nintendo characters is going to be something that will hinge on the success of the NX, simply because they're already starting to do that. So I think that we will see maybe Nintendo and Microsoft work some things out where they could have some Nintendo characters in a Microsoft game or whatever the case may be. Or hell, you might even see them reach out to third parties and actually put, Nintendo characters in Skylanders or Lego. Disney Infinity's gone, so you can't put in Disney Infinity, but some of the Toys to Life games I think would be perfect for Nintendo.
Yeah, absolutely. What was your second bit of top news you had?
So Titanfall 2 is getting a little bit more hype. The director of Titanfall 2 is promising that this is going to be a game that will appeal to the masses, to every type of gamer. Now, typically when you hear that, you tend to think, oh, this is going to be an easy game. It's not going to provide the amount of difficulty that I require in a first person shooter or third person shooter for that matter. It might be bland in terms of its gameplay. It's not going to produce anything that is revolutionary. So what do you think about the comments that Titanfall 2 is going to appeal to more than just the core first-person shooter gamer?
I think that's kind of good news, now that they're going to be on both PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, they are looking to expand the audience. And I think by, talking to all likes, all types of gamers out there, I think it's a smart approach. I don't think Titanfall 2 is going to be that game that's has the esports type of, just extreme difficulty that you see in some of those, like Dooms and games like that. I like the idea of making this, speak to the masses. I mean, that's good news for me because I'm not someone who's going to be, in the tops of the leaderboard, on a shooter by any means. I mean, unless it's a game that I spend a lot of time with, which when it comes to shooters, I don't really give them the attention like I used to. Since there are so many good games that come out, I just play a bunch of different games. And in order to get really good at shooters, you have to live it and breathe it. And I like the fact this is going to take a more laid back approach.
I mean, it should definitely, work in terms of sales. If you do, and I guess if you do want a competitive shooter, EA provides Battlefield 1 for you. Mm-hmm. So if you're that type of gamer, then you should probably steer clear of this one. Because it looks like this one is going to be geared more towards the casual shooting fan.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. Now, I was gonna say real quick, like moving into the future, like I would love to see that game get some type of VR compatibility with it, because the fact that you are getting into this big mech suit, it would be cool like in VR if like when you were inside the mech, like looking through the hood would look like you're in some type of robot. Like, wouldn't that be kind of dope?
I could probably see them maybe in Titanfall 3 adding a VR mode where it's just multiplayer, but you'll just be inside of a mech and it'll just be mech battles or whatever the case may be. I think that's the coolest part of Titanfall. I really don't want to be wall running and stuff like that in VR. I think I'd get super
Yeah,
nauseous.
I think they would have to find the balance, and like they say that. I think they're saying like all games will be playable in VR. Like you could just use it as like your screen, and so
Yeah.
like if they could find a way to marry the two to where like when you are just like playing as the character, not in the mech suit, you just have like the normal screen mode, and then when you hop into the mech is when you go into that full VR experience. Like that would be cool to see something like that. And since they are saying that this is the type of game that they're not looking to be crazy competitive with it, like I think that would be a good addition. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I don't know if the PSVR is going to be powerful enough to handle that kind of looking at it in terms of this is like a 60-inch screen that you're looking at, and then once you get into the mech, all of a sudden it goes from being a screen to actually being inside the game. That may not be powerful enough to handle that transition, but I mean it's definitely a good idea.
Yeah, I wonder if like maybe like as you're crawling into the mech, they could do like a quick blackening of the screen, and like just kind of make it fade away, and then like when you open like kind of open your eyes, like now you're in the VR space. Like do something like that perhaps.
I mean, maybe. Like I said, it will determine on the headset that you're on, especially since this is going to be on the PlayStation. I would assume it's on the PlayStation VR. That might be something that like you would need a PlayStation Neo to make happen or something like that. So
Yeah, for sure. But good top news segment we had there. Now let's get into the EDG Weekly topic. And Pedro, what do you got for us this week?
and the many gaming conversations that we have on the group, you made it know, or you hinted at some thoughts on the reception of the Legend of Zelda, the new Legend of Zelda game, and why you think that people may be overhyping the game. So I figured, you know what? Let me give Jay the floor. Let's hear his thoughts out, and if we need to have a discussion regarding what you think, then we can have that.
Yeah, so the issue I have with what I'm seeing a lot of people on the internet saying that, that Zelda was the highlight of the conference, and that, that was Nintendo stealing the conference, even though they had a terrible conference. When just showing off Zelda was enough for them to win over the hearts of the gamers and stuff. And I'm seeing a lot of people just like praising this game and just saying like, this is going to be the definitive game of like the last 10 years. I'm seeing like a lot of crazy comments in regards to the game. Now, I watched the gameplay footage, and yes, the game looks absolutely impressive. We're finally getting a Zelda that's going to be open world. I mean, it's what a lot of gamers have always wanted. And the problem I have is when I see that game, and then I turn around and I go look at the game Horizon Zero Dawn, which is also an RPG, open world, and then I kind of compare the two. Like, I just kind of, in my head, I'm like, Zero Dawn. Now, here's a game that looks like it's pushing technology, it's pushing the visuals. they did a lot of interesting things with the weapon wheel and just the different crafting that you're able to do, and just the different, traps that you're able to set. Like, I saw a lot of originality, and I saw a lot of, developers pushing themselves to be original and try out some new interesting things. And it's all, in the gameplay footage, like where the giant dinosaur mech thing, runs into the hub, and it was destructible, and, just a bunch of interesting things. And then when I went back and I started thinking about that Zelda, gameplay trailer again, I'm just like, it didn't really do anything new. Like, I seen a lot of people hyped that, Link can jump now. Like, isn't that a pretty standard mechanic? Like, what are your thoughts on this?
So I go back to the argument saying that Nintendo has always been behind the eight ball, and the fact that they're just catching up to basic gaming mechanics of the last 10 years, maybe 5-10 years. I think something's beeping. I'm not sure if that's you or me. But not me either, actually. Weird. Hold on. Actually, no. I'm a liar. It is me. Sorry. So yeah, I think that the mechanic. I mean, they've always been behind the eight ball. The mechanics, of jumping around and climbing and stuff like that. We've seen that from Uncharted. We've seen that from a couple other open world platforming games. Not platforming games, open world action adventure games. And the fact that it's the fact that people are going crazy about this in terms of, or really are really excited about just basic things like this, just means that we're hungry for Nintendo to just be the status quo. Like, we don't want Nintendo to be great. We just want you to be the status quo. If you can be the status quo, we'll be happy. Like, we want Nintendo and we want Sony and Microsoft to push the envelope. I don't want you to push the envelope, Nintendo. I want you to be the status quo. You become the status quo, and you instantly bring yourself into the discussion. You could potentially become the best out by just being part of the status quo. Don't push the envelope. Don't try to out innovate everyone else. We just want you to be as good as everything that's out there, and the consumer base will support you. That's what I think that you're seeing right now.
Yeah, I'm trying to let that digest, but yeah, it does make sense. Do you agree with what these people are saying on the internet, saying that like this is the end all be all game that was shown at E3? Like, did you see games that were better? Because I feel like I did, and it wasn't just Horizon Zero Dawn. Like, there were a lot of other games that innovated a lot more. They pushed technology a lot further than what I think is being seen from Zelda. Like,
I mean, we made that abundantly clear when we chose our top 3 games of E3 2016. It wasn't on our list. It just wasn't for us. That game just isn't for me. I'll play it when it's on the NX. I don't want to play it on the Wii U. I don't want to play it on a controller with a huge tab on it. I don't want to play it on a second thought classic controller that they call it. Like, I'll play it on the new console if the new console does enough for me to buy it, and then I'll experience it then. Other than that, Horizon Zero Dawn looked great. Resident Evil 7 looked great. Gears of War 4 looked great. Watch Dogs looked better. Titanfall 2 looked amazing. Call of Duty Infinite Warfare looked better. Hell, even the Forza Horizon almost had me wanting to go and pre-order that game. Zelda just didn't do it for me. It's just I saw it. I said, okay, cool. So this is Nintendo, getting into that status quo where, they've got a game that looks decent graphically, is big, has much different colors, has a huge map. Gameplay mechanics are getting, up to this decade at least. And it's just a small step. I don't think it's the end all be all. I think that for Nintendo fans that have been hungry for it, yeah, absolutely. You know what I mean? Like it's like saying, hey, look, I've been eating Tostino's microwavable pizza for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And for the first time, now I get to go have Papa John's or Pizza Hut or Domino's or whatever the case may be. And I'm back to eating pizza that everyone else was eating, as opposed to having this dollar, frozen pizza for the last 8 years.
Yeah, for sure. One more thing I want to hit on is, do you think that gamers, should wait to play this on the NX, even if they have the Wii U, or do you think this is a game that you want to be part of the discussion and you need to play it like as soon as you possibly can?
If you're a fan of the genre, fan of the console, fan of the actual Zelda brand, I would buy it. I would play it now, experience it, beat it, and then once the NX comes out, get it again, because you don't know what could be the differences. Honestly, this is kind of a Last of Us moment right here, where Nintendo releases a game that gets everybody super hyped. It's gonna be great. Storyline's gonna be good. The gameplay is gonna be solid. Like I said, it looks pretty damn good right now. But it's also going to be the last AAA game of this generation, and will probably be the anchor for the new generation in the NX, just like The Last of Us was for the PlayStation 3, and then on the PlayStation 4, kind of that anchor for them, at least until Uncharted released. So, many people played both on both, played both versions of the game, and I think that, I don't see a problem doing it again with this one.
Much agreed. Good topic this week. Now we've reached the end of the show in our final segment that we call EDG Endgame. Pedro, do you have any shout outs or anything to close out on?
Yeah, real quick. How was the Orlando VR meet? Shout out to them for actually having a meet for VR enthusiasts out there. So if anyone in Orlando is an enthusiast of VR, wants to talk, hang out with other people who just like the prospects of VR, maybe want to develop games for them, there is a monthly VR meet that Jay went to. So how was that?
Yeah, so first of all, they usually hold these meetups like at the Orlando Library, which is a good venue to have it at. Like, there's plenty of parking right around the library, but this time they had it somewhere different. I forget what the name of the building was, but parking was not great. So just wanted to throw that out there. But once, we were all able to find the room, the turnout, we had about probably around 30 people there. Most of them were developers. I think I was one of the only people that were there, just as media, just checking it out. But it was pretty cool. The guy that hosted, he played some gameplay trailers that were shown at E3. That what we looked at the Final Fantasy VR demo. We looked at the Resident Evil demo. So we kind of talked about, some of the games that were shown and how they're using VR. And then they got into talks of, the nerdy stuff started, where all the developers were talking about, how they were developing for VR specifically. And, they're all using like Oculus and, because it's open to any developer. So they're all using, I guess, Steam in order to develop. But it was pretty good. I enjoyed myself. It was definitely worth, getting to hear, that side of it, the development side of these types of games, and the complications that come along with it. Because it's one thing to develop a game, period, but then when you're developing a game for VR, like, I guess they're all encountering a lot of different issues. And there was definitely one guy that was in the room that you could tell was light years beyond where everyone else was at, that was actually using the little, what do you call the little controllers?
The move controllers, the
Yeah,
little
like,
paddle shifters.
yeah, the little controllers. And like, I guess nobody else was actually even using those because they couldn't. I guess the barrier to entry to actually use those is not that simple. But this guy was just like taking them all to school, putting them in the backpack, and was just telling them how to actually do it. So it was unique to get to sit there and like just hear all these developers like, discussing how to develop for the technology. But the takeaway from the meetup was that there is a lot of people in Orlando that are interested, and I think Orlando will definitely be a hub, for VR development. So that's kind of exciting because I can really see the enthusiasm for VR, especially here in Orlando. We went to Indianomicon meetups, and we saw like smaller games that were being developed for, like the 3DS and stuff like that. But here we have actual VR games in development, and I feel like there's a bigger presence there than any other type of development that we've seen. So, yeah, that was kind of the takeaway there. So, yeah, I enjoyed it.
So, can't wait to go there next month and kind of chat it up with the devs and learn some stuff about the development process of making a VR game. It's got to be different. It's much different than anything else that we've kind of been used to, especially going to Indianomicon and talking to the guys there that are indie developers for Xbox, PlayStation, PC, as well as the mobile consoles. So also, quick correction: if you use the Oculus Rift to develop, they have their own developer kit. They're not using Steam. Steam is actually partnered with HTC Vive. So before you guys start commenting on our videos, letting us know that, I figured I'd make the correction now.
Yeah. But for closeout, I just want to say, please go check us out over at Facebook. That's where we have a lot of discussions, and that's where we put a lot of the articles that we talk about up right in Facebook groups. So head over there under the groups section, look up Extremely Decent Games. We're very active over there. We get into some good conversations. I think we got about 50 or 60 people over there. Really good group of individuals. We're all excited about the same thing, real passionate about it. We're trying to grow our audience over there, that'll help kind of coincide with our YouTube podcast that we're doing. Like we're trying to start the conversation there and then have that conversation here on camera. So if you want to get involved, go over to Facebook, check us out there. We're also on Twitter, Extremely Decent Games, all one word. One shout out that I wanted to give, this Tuesday we got a new game headed over to the PS4. It is called 7 Days to Die, and if you are a fan of Minecraft, this is kind of like Minecraft with actual graphics. So the game's going to be retailing at $30 over on PlayStation 4, and it's a really cool game. And like the hook to the game is you have 7 days to kind of prepare yourself for the blood moon. And once the blood moon comes, you have crazy amounts of zombies that they can smell you and they can sense where your location is at. So there's nowhere to hide. Only thing that you can do is fortify a base that's strong enough to help you survive the night. And aside from building up your base, you need to monitor your character's vitals. You need to make sure you got plenty to eat and drink, and all this is found out in the wild. In between the 7 days, like while you're out crafting and cutting down trees and stuff, there are zombies that are going to be out in the wild. They're pretty docile. You're only going to find a couple here and there, and they're pretty easy to take out. Every night there is going to be a horde. Now it's not going to be as strong as that blood moon horde, but really cool idea. I'm really excited. I'm actually going to be doing a new web series where every week I'm going to be adding additions to the base, doing some crafting. It's going to be fully edited, so there aren't. I'm going to try not to have any boring stuff in there. So keep an eye out for that. Other than that, that's it. That's all I got. You good, Pedro?
Yes, sir. Also, check out our YouTube. I think Nate should be there playing Odin's Sphere every once in a while. So if you guys are into that series, check that out.
Yeah, he's wrapping that game up pretty soon too. I'm not sure what he's going to move on to next. And one last thing, because I don't want to forget this, over on the PlayStation side, there is a flash sale going on. There's some really good games that are really cheap. One of the games on that list I'd like to shout out is Mad Max, the game. A lot of people slept on that game. It's actually really good. I spent 120 hours in it, so that's pretty that's a pretty good testament as to how good that game was. So check out the flash sale over on PSN. With that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on episode 21 of EDG Weekly. We will see you next week.